Welcome to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. Hi, I'm Brian Fernandez. Today we're going to talk about Splunk, and Splunk Inc. is an American software company based in San Francisco, California, that produces software for searching, monitoring, and analyzing machine-generated data via a web-style interface. And its software helps to capture, index, and correlate real-time data in a searchable repository from which it can generate graphs, reports, alerts, dashboards, and visualizations. Now, Splunk has just been acquired in September 2023 by Cisco in a $28 billion all-cash deal. Now, to tell us more about Splunk and some of the key trends that we're seeing, including the rise of student-powered security operations centers, and yes, you heard right, student-powered, we have Simon Davies, Senior Vice President and General Manager, APAC at Splunk. Simon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, great to be with you today.
Now, Simon, against that great backdrop of your office, tell us a little bit about Splunk, the company, your background, and some of the interesting stuff that you're doing in 2025.
Yeah, so look, Splunk's been around for a bit over 20 years as a standalone business. And we were really founded with the principle of how do you make machine data, which is logs, metrics, traces, the digital exhaust that comes off your IT systems, usable for real-world applications. A lot of that manifests itself in cybersecurity that we're extremely well known for, but also in the area of observability. So thinking about applications and business processes supported by technology, and how do you deliver those in a resilient way? And so Splunk really does that at a scale that nobody else can do. We really look across the entire organization, the ability to take all of the data together, and then make it meaningful and useful for you to drive both business decisions, but also drive operational processes in areas like cybersecurity that we talked about. So we're pretty excited about that. And we formally joined Cisco. The acquisition actually closed in March of 2024. So we were announced in September of 23. March 2024, we came across, and we're working hard now to try and make sure we deliver even better outcomes for our customers, where they're both Cisco and Splunk customers together.
Now, post-acquisition, what's changed? It's coming up to a year since the acquisition closed. What's changed, and how has the impact been in the APAC region?
Yeah, so Cisco have been really good at understanding how mission critical Splunk is to our customers. If you think about, the largest Fortune 500 companies in the world, the banks, the telcos, government agencies, all heavily rely on Splunk as a critical piece of their, digital resilience infrastructure, cyber, IT operations, business insights. And so Cisco recognized that and have been very careful to make sure that the responsibility for supporting Splunk and the usage of Splunk has still sat with the Splunk team, and that's the plan moving forward. That said, we were able to rapidly identify opportunities where things like AI and intelligence and scale, by bringing the products more closely together, we're able to deliver even better outcomes for our customers. So an example of that is Cisco had the market-leading threat intelligence capability called Talos. Talos is now directly integrated into Splunk, and we've made the intelligence feeds available for all of our customers for cybersecurity reasons. So there's some really nice sort of insights we're starting to be able to drive from Cisco's really complete portfolio of network security and collaboration solutions, feeding data into Splunk and being able to make that more powerful, give better insights, drive better decisions, drive more efficient outcomes. And of course, in the world of AI and AI increasingly becoming core parts of business operations, being able to have visibility of that data end to end will help drive those kinds of outcomes that organizations are looking to achieve with modern transformations.
Now, staying in the APAC region and focusing on that, what are some of the industries that you're strongest in the region, and which markets are you really strong in?
Yeah, we see people right across the region consuming Splunk. Some of our markets, such as Australia, Splunk is actually quite broadly adopted. We work with many of the banks, the telecommunications companies, many of the large government agencies, as well as all of basically the the large complex organizations that are trying to solve problems with data. And if you think about cybersecurity, and Australia particularly has a unique set of cybersecurity legislation and critical infrastructure legislation that organizations are focusing on being compliant with, having visibility across that data is really a core foundation of that. Our Japan market is one of our fastest growing across the region. We've got great work that we're doing there with organizations in manufacturing, financial services, public sector. We've recently achieved our ISMAP certification in Japan, which is the government guidelines for being able to deliver cloud services and deliver our capabilities to help in a compliant way specific to the Japan market. A great example of a customer there is NEC, who use Splunk to really drive visibility, and particularly from a cyber operations point of view, across all of their organization and what that looks like. And if you think about the complexity with their presence right across the region, having a single point of view and a single pane of glass that they can look at and really understand their risk, what are the attack vectors they're currently suffering under, how are they addressing it, how are their systems standing up to the challenges that are constantly facing organizations. It's a really powerful outcome. And then across South Asia and ASEAN, Greater China, we continue to see organizations adopting Splunk. Many of them are earlier on their journey, but we certainly see many, again, financial services customers, public sector customers, here in Singapore, customers like Singapore Airlines, which uses Splunk to deliver resilient customer experiences. So thinking about all the digital touch points that they have along the customer journey and how do they get visibility across that? Well, Splunk takes the machine data and makes it useful for them to go back the other way and really deliver what is recognized as the best-in-class passenger experience. So we're really excited to be partnering with many of those organizations, and we see a lot of opportunity across the region.
Now, looking ahead at some of Simon, in some of the interesting research that you've come up with, you've just come out in 2025 with your predictions report. Could you give us some insights into some of the key findings from that report?
Yeah, so predictions, it's an annual piece of research that we do. It's available on our website. Many executives use it just to kind of help baseline what they see as unlocking important areas to focus on in the year ahead. Some of the key ones that came through, we've seen AI, a lot of POCs, but not a lot of organizations have been able to move to demonstrating real value yet from those. A lot of organizations... And
that's a real pressure, isn't it? I want to interrupt you here because the conversations that I've had with leaders like yourself, this keeps coming out, especially the final quarter of last year. It's really around customers or key stakeholders of customers saying, hey, we've done all this AI stuff. We need to see some returns out of it. There's a real push, isn't there?
Yeah, so I think there was a sense in the market initially that you couldn't overinvest in AI because you couldn't afford not to invest in AI. So the risk of underinvesting in AI for an organization was probably greater than the risk of overinvesting in AI. I think what we've now seen is as many of those POCs and many of the early areas that people were exploring, whether it was with publicly available LLMs or even the smaller, domain-specific, topic-specific LLMs start to come in, is we're now to the point where companies are thinking about, okay, I've made this investment, I've started to demonstrate the value, but can I operationalize that? Can I actually bring it into my organization and then start to differentiate against that? And that's a challenge because it also is then a matter of how do I then secure that and deliver it in a way that isn't going to give my customers a hallucination in terms of their experience. We've seen many examples so far in the industry that that's doing it. So from an operational risk point of view, organizations are really starting to think about that. And that was a big theme that came through in our predictions report.
So, and this is and let me break it down a little bit, that move away from large language models towards smaller language models and more domain specific. And that's one of the key things, isn't it?
It is. And I think one of the areas that people have started to realize that to be able to leverage your own data, first of all, you have to have visibility into that data. And that's where a platform like Splunk becomes critical. LG in Korea is a great example of an organization that uses Splunk as the underlying engine to bring all the data together that they're then using to train their production AI-specific LLMs. I had a great conversation with the LG team recently when I was in our user conference, .conf in San Francisco, where we sat down and we actually talked about how for the last 10 years, they've been bringing data together, been building specific models around areas like supply chain optimization and capabilities like that that really do help them differentiate their manufacturing processes. These are real world examples that have your own data, which is the valuable part of what you train an AI engine on and the context-specific AI engine on. How do you use your data to be specific and context-specific in terms of the outcomes you're trying to drive? That is super powerful, but you're not going to be using public models to do that. You're not going to be using, the chat GPTs of the world and these kinds of things because they require consuming your proprietary data.
Exactly, and you don't want people to have your proprietary data.
Yeah, and if you're facing this conundrum of how do I build and invest and train these models, and there's big data center heavy requirements around that, as well as sustainability challenges with that, versus consuming the public models. And then both of those present huge cybersecurity threats as well. And we've seen with governments increasingly relying on regulation to enforce reporting, compliance reporting, as well as critical infrastructure capabilities that you need to attest to. It's a real challenge for organizations to think about that. And that was a common theme that came through our report.
The other thing also, which you attested to earlier, I think in the conversation, is around cyber resilience. And that's really taken a greater level of importance among really key stakeholders in leadership. Walk us through some of the key challenges and what you see companies need to do better.
Yeah, so AI has enabled the attackers with many, many more tools and capabilities. It's lowered the barriers to creating phishing attacks or business email compromise. So it's made the job harder for defenders. At the same time, AI has made it easier for defenders to be able to process large amounts of information and be able to get insights and visibility from that. We do that with Splunk, and our platform is a key enabler in most of the very large security operations centers in the largest corporations across the region. The challenge of that is one of visibility. And so most cyber operations, most of your CISOs out there will have anywhere between 60 and 80 different IT tools using to protect, defend, detect incidents and respond when a cyber incident occurs, because that's what governments are now asking organizations to do. When something happens, you must report. Singapore launched new legislation last year. Australia in the 2023 to 30 cyber initiative was very clear in its mapping. Malaysia launched new legislation last year as well, that companies now need to be compliant to. There are actually fiduciary responsibilities on directors for failures to be able to respond to these incidents. And it's a question of visibility of data. So security really is a data problem. You can have lots of different point tools that look at endpoints or might look at firewalls, but the ability to look end-to-end across your organization, understand what's changed, understand how, when an attack occurs, what was compromised, what data was potentially exposed, so then we can take appropriate reactions. That's the mindset organizations need to bring. And that's something that we're kind of super focused on, is not just looking at a point solution or how you secure a mobile device, but really looking holistically across your entire organization and the data that you have to drive those outcomes. And then obviously AI plays a big part of that as well.
Now, how are you helping then these organizations faced with these reporting challenges, helping them to comply better and comply easier? Because it sounds like one of the key challenges is compliance with regulation is going to be a big challenge moving forward.
So compliance with regulation, if you are, there's a term we use in the industry called you have to eat your cyber vegetables, right? You can't escape needing to do the things to be healthy, to be resilient, to put the right kind of controls, the right policies in place. If you do all of those, compliance with the legislation is very easy, because it's a matter of an incident's occurred. I can rapidly identify what the incident was, I can report in an appropriate time frame, which many of the jurisdictions are looking for, and then I can provide the data to the regulators and the investigators so then they can help us with the remediation activity. So I tend to think about it as if an organization is eating its cyber vegetables, is properly having visibility into the end-to-end activities that are going on, the full digital estate of their organization. They're driving the right kinds of detections and alerts that are coming off the tools, off your firewalls, off your endpoint tools that will help you understand when something happened, how do I both respond quickly, but also how do I capture that for compliance purposes. So it's not so much a compliance reporting challenge, it's more, do I have the capabilities that, when an incident occurs, because unfortunately now for most organizations, it's when, not if, that I need to be prepared for, to be able to respond to that. And that's the question we see boards increasingly asking organizations as well is, do you have this capability? What will it take for us to build this capability? And how do we build that over time?
Now, Simon, what are the key challenges facing not only vendors, but organizations across the world is really the talent shortage around cybersecurity. Now, one interesting thing that I think your study talked about was student-powered SOCs to help governments address cybersecurity talent shortages. Could you just walk us through that? That seems quite amazing in terms of how desperate people are in terms of talent.
Yeah, there is absolutely in our industry a gap in skills and capabilities. The complexity that AI has added to the attackers' capabilities has meant that organizations need to really scale up their capabilities. And skill shortage is one of the biggest parts of that. What we've seen and what we've been very focused on is how do we work with tertiary institutions like Nanyang Polytechnic here in Singapore to build skills in the student population. And we actually work with 36 universities across the region where we're now embedding Splunk into the curriculum of those institutions. What that means is there is a body of capability now emerging, both still in the institutions themselves, but rapidly, early in career talent who are coming out better equipped to be able to help solve that problem, to be able to be the human being that you need in the process when, as we're bringing the data together, as we're looking at all of the different events occurring, as we're triggering what's called a notable, which is something we want to investigate, there are people there with those skills. And so we've seen security operations centers, SOCs, as they're called in the industry. I don't know if it's a good or a bad name, but SOCs increasingly say, well, are there ways I can augment my talent? I can bring in university talent. I can give them exposure. They might not have the deep business understanding or experience, but they certainly have some of these key skills and capabilities that can help me augment my SOC operations. And at the same time, help me build the next generation of security professionals. And we're really excited about that, really excited about working with tertiary institutions around helping to build those capabilities, because I think it'll unlock a lot more cyber capabilities, which is one of the most precious resources in the market. And as Cisco, I think it's only going to help us in the long term as well. So super excited about that. And I just love the different way people are thinking about trying to solve these problems, right? This is not easy work, and just trying to do the status quo will just create an unsustainable, not commercially viable future for all of us. And we want that to be the case.
Now, Simon, speaking about solving problems, what are three key things we're at Q1 of 2025? What are three key things and pieces of advice you'd like to give board members across APAC for them to think about at the start of the year?
Yeah, so there's three things. Okay, I probably think of about 10, but let me see if I can narrow it down to the three that I think are the most relevant. First of all, I think as a board, and I sit on a number of boards across the region, you have to be responsible for thinking about digital resilience within my organizations. And a lot of that is, how am I going to meet my customers' expectations, remain competitive, and unlock innovation through removing noise and friction in my systems? So I can have really innovative front-end applications. My modern consumer will not tolerate an application that doesn't respond in a timely fashion. We all use transportation apps as an example in most countries. Mm-hmm. We all have 3 or 4 different service providers we rely on. if the transportation app that I'm using fails to meet my expectation or fails to respond quickly, what do? I immediately move to the next provider. And so as an entity, I need to be thinking about digital resilience, not just in terms of my core, is my system up and running, but is it actually meeting my customers' needs? Is my mobile interface or my web interface interacting with them in a way that they expect from modern service providers and consumers? So that's a big part. Secondly, I need to understand my cyber risk. As we said, it's when, not if, and what's our capability to respond to that. And that's where, as a board, and particularly with risk committees, we're very much seeing them come to the CIO, the CISO in an organization, the CISO, who's the Chief Information Security Officer, and really look at them and how do we assess our risk? What kinds of capabilities do we have? What kinds of capabilities do we need to build? Because cybersecurity, it is actually resource intensive. So I can't make myself 100% safe. That's not possible. So the question then becomes okay, are we building the right kind of capabilities for the risk profile of our organization with our industry, and how do we respond to that? And I think that's probably the second piece. And so then the third piece is not just thinking about our actual systems focused on our business processes and our customer experience or our cybersecurity, is then our operational resilience. Internally, there is a war for talent, not just in cybersecurity skills, but in all of our businesses. How do I make sure I'm bringing the right tools, the innovation to the people I need to be driving my organization, whether that's how I'm using AI in my finance, how am I using the third-party large language models that might be helping my people in recruitment write better job descriptions. How do I responsibly manage that from a risk point of view to make sure I'm not leaking data in that way? And we're really excited. We actually just launched a new solution here at Cisco Splunk called AI Defense, which really starts to think about how do I look holistically both at the way I'm using models, the data that's involved in the models, but also understand within my organization what other models that may not be approved, that haven't gone through the right checks and controls, are being deployed. And I think making sure you understand how AI policies and what our AI defense needs to look like would probably be the third area as a board I'd want to be focused on.
Simon, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience has as well. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think the job of digital resilience, which we talked about, whether it's operations or cyber, is hard and complex. At Splunk, our job is how do we make the people trying to do that complex work, whether it's your cyber teams, your IT teams, your operations teams. Our job is to make them more effective, more productive, more efficient. I think as organizations, that also needs to be prioritized because it's often at times not seen as critical. But if you look at the implications, and we've seen very public incidents in places like Australia with organizations like Optus that have had both very large cyber incidents with data exfiltration and data loss that was really impactful to their organization, to really significant disruptions. If you think about, in hindsight, I'm sure they would have wished that they had have done more work up front to protect themselves as an organization, understand what that looks like. So I think as business professionals, as business leaders, the critical thing you can do is making sure you're supporting the IT and the cyber organizations as they're trying to deliver this difficult resilience and this difficult outcomes. And I think it's not an easy thing to do. The AI is making it easy for attackers. The competitive pressures continue to grow even faster. And I think as organizations, IT should be starting to be thought about as a strategic priority, and that end-to-end visibility of that hard work that they're doing, how do we help those professionals deliver on that, will be critical to organizations' success moving forward.
Simon, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Great to be connected, Brian. Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers. We've been speaking to Simon Davies. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager, APAC at Splunk. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. It will also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and third-party websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.